Hey, my name is Olivia, and what you are about to see is going to be a video kind of split between two different sections, I guess. I filmed a September book recap a little bit ago, but I never got around to doing anything with that footage, and I decided that instead of refilming that entire thing, I'll just combine it with a separate October book recap. So this is going to be like a fall book recap, but just ignore the fact that the first half I'm going to be in a different place in a different outfit at a different time, and the second half is going to be here. So yeah, I'll go ahead and play the September books. There are 4 of them, and then we'll get into me now. The first book that I read was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This is, I think, my favorite Jane Austen book I've read so far. It's my third, and I think my favorite. To me, I just feel like this book had me thinking the most out of them so far. I got the most out of it just upon first read. Something that I just really liked about Jane Austen is I feel like everything that I've read by her is so interesting from a historical perspective and looking at kind of what society was like 200-ish years ago, especially from a young woman's perspective. And this book I felt like really was a very good example of that, because when they're talking about Sense and Sensibility, they're kind of talking about the life and the planning for the future of a young woman, specifically when it comes to marriage, because marriage is at this time was one of the most important things for a young woman to consider, because obviously they want marriage to be about love. They want to marry a man that they love, but they have to think of it from a financial and safety and security perspective, because that's what they have. That's what they depend on to live good lives. And so it follows 2 sisters, Marianne and Eleanor, and Pumpkin is biting my sweater because he's a freaking menace. It's also important to note that Marianne and Eleanor are poor. So they have to think about the wealth and the security of the man that they're going to marry as well, because that's really important when you're a poor woman who doesn't have much of a means outside of marriage to support yourself in the future. So I felt like Marianne was more of a representation of sensibility. She's the romantic, she's very optimistic, she's following her heart, and Eleanor is more of the one with sense, and she's thinking, she's using her head, she's thinking very logistically about everything and what is going to be technically the best option for everyone. It's just so interesting watching these 2 young women prepare for, how they're going to spend the rest of their lives and their methods of going about it. And so this book, obviously doesn't have much technical advice for a modern day woman, but I think the significance of sense and sensibility and the balance between those 2 things is never gonna not be an important topic. It's never not gonna be something to think about. So I would recommend reading it. And it's also of course, it's dramatic, it's fun, there's romance, there's love, there's drama. So yeah, this is definitely my favorite so far. And next, I read The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman is the author who wrote Coraline. Now, I've never read Coraline. I've seen the movie plenty of times, but I've never read the book. But I can tell that this is the man who came up with the Coraline concept, because it has that same spooky, mysterious, strange aura to it, and it's also written once again from a child's perspective, so it's enhanced in how scary and strange it is because it's from a child's point of view. This is a story about, our main character never gets a name, but he returns home to his childhood neighborhood as a middle-aged man, and he comes back and he is suddenly bombarded with all of these memories that he has seemed to have forgotten from his childhood years, specifically when he was 7 years old. So then you're rewind back to when he's 7 years old, and he befriends this girl at the end of the lane named Letty, and he befriends her and her family, and he soon realizes that there's something strange going on. These people seem to know something about the world that he doesn't, and there's some kind of strange happenings that he doesn't understand. And honestly, I still don't really understand everything that happened in this book, because it's from a child's point of view. It's almost you can't tell what is exaggerated about what happened in this story versus what is under exaggerated. And I don't want to give any of it away, because it truly is something that I feel goes together so well. Overall, I'm pretty sure that the message has something to do with the contrast between childhood and adulthood and the things that you learn along the way. And it's kind of devastating at some points, how sometimes sad it is to grow up. Oh, well, you know what? This line is really nice. It says, "Oh, monsters are scared," said Letty. "That's why they're monsters. And as for grown-ups, I'm going to tell you something important. Grown-ups don't look like grown-ups on the inside either. Outside, they're big and thoughtless, and they always know what they're doing. Inside, they look just like they always have, like they did when they were your age. The truth is, there aren't any grown-ups, not one in the whole wide world. And I felt that one. I was like, you're right, girl. There are no grown-ups, not in the whole wide world, man. I feel it. Next, I read Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. So this is a book that I got as a blind date with a book from Barnes & Noble. And so I'm gonna go ahead and tell you what it said on that packaging that inspired me to buy the book. So it said it was a mystery book. It said, read if you like courtroom dramas, realistically flawed characters, and immigrant stories. And I want to say that there was one more, but those are the ones that stuck out to me. And it definitely lived up to that. The characters were very realistically flawed because, like, it's kind of like a whodunit, but regardless of who actually done it, regardless of who done it, everybody played a role, and so that's always cool. So anyway, it's about this like experimental chamber device that is used as like treatment for a variety of different medical conditions. It's like a depressurized chamber thing. I don't know science. I don't know how it really works, or if this is like a realistic portrayal of a scientific invention, but regardless, it explodes and people die and people get hurt. And so it is determined that it was intentional. Like, this was something that somebody did and not something that just accidentally happened. So you're given all of that information pretty quick, pretty early on in the book, and then you're spending the rest of the time trying to figure out who done it, why they done it. And so if you don't like courtrooms and all of that, like, because a lot of it takes place in the courtroom. If you don't like that, not for you, but I really like courtrooms. And lastly, to get into kind of the spooky zone, I read 1922 by Stephen King. I got this book for my birthday and I did not expect it to be so short. I didn't know that it was like a novella type thing. Anyway, this is another book where like it's short, but there's a lot that happens because Stephen King's a good writer. So this is a story about a man who murders his wife and gets his 14-year-old son to help him do it. This man is a monster. This man is a POS. We hate this guy. There's one point where like he tries to say like, but I'm not a monster. He says, I believe that there is another man inside of every man, a stranger, a conniving man. Then he says, I am not a monster. I tried to save her from the conniving man. I told her that if we could not agree, blah, 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 blah. What do you mean you're not a monster? You're blaming it on a stranger inside yourself. It's so, an author who can write from the point of view of somebody who's could do such an atrocious thing and has such a scary mind that can justify and explain something so terrible is horrible. And the poor teenage son is just, yeah. Anyway, his actions result in his life kind of going to shit. And he's like, how could this have happened to me? And then he kind of starts going insane by the end. Things get really crazy. Like I said, so much happens in this short period of time and it doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel like things are skipped out on. It feels so well put together. This length is honestly probably perfect. Very recommend for this book if you like unreliable narrators and murder stories and scary, gruesome, weird stuff. I'd recommend that.
Okay, so those were the September books. Now we're gonna get into the October books. I'm excited. I read 5 books in October, and it's kind of funny because it ended up being that I read 3 vampire books and 2 witch books. So gotta say, there's not a whole lot of variety when it comes to subject matter. I didn't necessarily mean for it to turn out this way, but it's just kind of what happened, so give me a break. But yeah. Well, let's just get into it. So the first book that I read was for my book club. It was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sengu Mandana? The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. A cool thing about a book club is that I never in a million years would have picked up this book on my own. I would not have touched this book on my own. It is one of those cozy, seasonal type of feel-good novels. So it's not like spooky witches, it's like cutesy witches. It was fun. It is about a witch whose name I already forget, Mika. And in the society, basically, witches are, a secret. The whole of society does not know about the existence of witches, and they kind of have to keep themselves on the down low because they don't want anything bad to happen. This book kind of ends up being like a found family type of thing. So Mika is basically hired to help tutor/nanny, mostly tutor, these 3 young witches that are I believe the oldest is 10 years old, so they're little baby witches. She goes to help them learn. It's very, very sweet. It's very cozy. It's very cute. I liked the found family aspect of it. There is, however, a romance in this book, and I didn't really love it. I definitely think that there was room for a romance in this book. I just didn't really like the way it was done. In certain ways, it did feel forced and cliche, very it was just weird. Very much so of the who hurt you type of thing, and I don't always love that depending on the situation, and I didn't really like it here. I could have done without it, but also like it wasn't that bad. It didn't destroy the reading experience, but this was it was fun. It was very easy to read. It went very quick. It was just sweet, and you know, I have no regrets about reading it. It wasn't my favorite thing in the world, but it most certainly wasn't my least favorite. So, Vampire Time. Woman Eating by Claire Coda. I heard really good things about this book, and I'm not going to lie to you when I say I was a little disappointed, just because I don't know what I was exactly expecting, but it wasn't quite this. So it's kind of about this young woman slash vampire. She's like half human, half vampire somehow. Her kind of trying to navigate her life without her mother for the first time, and you know, like moving into a new place, starting a new job, kind of trying to find herself, but she's also dealing with this supernatural hunger and like just a different way of experiencing life. And there were some very interesting moments in this book, and I'm not quite sure what I took away from it. It kind of confused me. I guess it's about finding yourself. I also, personally, I think my favorite part of it, my favorite like exploration in this book was the relationship with her mother, because her mother was, although she never explicitly says it, her mother was like emotionally abusive. But when she is discussing her life with her mom and her childhood, like her mom was very abusive. And I think that this kind of feeling of being othered is important, and like this self-hatred, she's really like holding herself back, and she's really like almost torturing herself. I don't know how to interpret the ending. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil it. This book just had a lot going on. I don't know. It just wasn't my favorite thing in the world, and I don't really quite have the words to explain why, but that's where we are. That's how it was. But that wouldn't stop me from recommending it. I definitely think that this is something that people could like. It's very interesting. I'm very curious to hear other interpretations of it. I'll probably have to look up what other people have said, because obviously my own brain is a small place and it doesn't have nearly as much information or whatever. So, all right, second vampire book, I read Salem's Lot by Stephen King. This book was 5 out of 5 stars for me. I really do love Stephen King, and this book was better than I even expected. It was a super interesting and super suspenseful vampire book about a small town called Jerusalem's Lot, shortened Salem's Lot, which is basically plagued by a vampire who like comes to town and starts wreaking havoc, and our main character is trying to stop it. You know, it's crazy because you get to know all these characters, and then terrible things start happening, and it was so entertaining. And there were these themes that I thought were really interesting of like evil and community, like the plague of evil on a community of people and how it can spread and, you know, just kind of destroy a space. And obviously this was like a very literal depiction of that with vampires. I just thought it was cool, and it talks a lot about evil. And there are other kind of forms of evil that I think are an undercurrent, you know, just like regular human evil, that I think kind of play into or almost act as like the vampires almost act as like a symbolism of it. I had so much fun. The suspense was crazy, and there's like sad moments too. There are some sad moments because you get emotionally attached to some of these characters, and gosh, and I loved all the references to Dracula, Bram Stoker's novel, and some of the like not even just implicit references, but like similar kind of situations and feelings. I thought that was kind of cool. I had a lot of fun with that one. That was definitely one of my faves. Next, we have my book of the month, The Book of Witching by C.J. Cook. When I was picking my book of the month, I didn't really know what to choose. This one seemed the most interesting to me, and oh my god, am I happy that this is what I picked. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It was so good. I don't know if everybody would feel the same way about it as I did, but I absolutely loved it. It is based on or inspired by a real witch trial from Scotland in 1594 of a woman named Alison Balfour. It talks about the witch trial. It's not like, I don't want to call it, because it's not like 100% historical fiction, but it's also not like a retelling, because it was 1594. We only have so much recorded information about what happened, and so it's kind of like, in my head, like an imaginative concept of what might have happened, with also some like very blatantly fictional elements to it. Like it uses some like real Celtic pagan like symbolism and like magic beliefs, which I thought was really cool. what she does that I thought was even cooler was that she brings it into the modern day of Allison's ancestors, and the magic and all of the things that happened back in 1594 are now coming back and impacting, not necessarily coming back, but like influencing all these years later. How many years is that even? So that's gonna be 430 years ago. So it's really, really cool. And yeah, I had a blast. I had an absolute blast. This book, I devoured it. I had such an amazing time reading it. I thought it was so compelling. But yeah, if you're wondering what the Book of Witching like actually means, that is another like pagan Celtic thing that I honestly don't know too much about the actual history about, but that's what this like Book of Witching concept is based on, and it is like a book, like a magical book. Yeah, it's really cool. So I would highly recommend this, especially if you're into witchcraft, if you're into like, you know, ancient witch trials, or I don't know if they're considered ancient, but if you're interested in that kind of stuff, this book was so cool. Huge recommend. 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it so much. And lastly, I read another vampire thing, Carmilla. This is arguably like one of the most iconic classics that I've ever read, just because of how special and unique this is. It is like a vampire book, but it's very strongly lesbian coded. I don't even think you could say it's coded. I think you would just have to say it is sapphic. Like it is what it is. What's really interesting though is that I cannot figure out for the life of me whether or not this is homophobic. Because from what I've looked up, like most people seem to think that it's like a very iconic, like LGBT representation in history, but I can't shake the feeling that it was also using homosexuality and just generally the exploration of female sexuality as an evil, unnatural thing, considering that its entire representation is through an evil vampire. But I don't know. I can't really tell. But still, I really liked it. Regardless of all of that stuff, I thought it was really, really cool. It was really fun. I loved these characters. And this edition specifically has illustrations. This is one of my favorite illustrations because there they are being lesbians. It was really cool and it was suspenseful. And then the editor, Carmen Maria Machado, put a lot of really cool notes in here to help kind of contextualize things and stuff like that. My personal favorite one was, "If this isn't an orgasm, nothing is." That was the note there at the bottom. So I thought it was really good. This book basically follows a father and a daughter who take in a girl around the daughter's age who was injured on travel with her mother, and her mom's like, "I have to keep going," and they're like, "Here, we'll take care of her while you're gone." She says, "I'll come get her in 3 months." And so she's living with them for 3 months, and she's a little bit weird. Strange things start happening, and then all of a sudden it's like vampire time, and it's really cool. I had a really great time. I'm still trying to understand the historical concept of this and whether or not it is homophobic. Like, I don't understand what this author's feelings on gay people were, feelings on women were. I cannot tell. So many people seem to think that it's a good thing, so I guess maybe they're right. I can't tell, but regardless, the love story I still think is really awesome, whether or not he intended it to be, and I had a great time, and I loved the illustrations. I thought the illustrations were so freaking cool. I would really recommend this, especially if you're like a vampire person, or if you've read Dracula. This predates Dracula, but quite a few decades, so you should absolutely read it, because this is actually a bit of more iconic than Dracula, in my opinion. Both of which have like those homoerotic undertones. I think Dracula has those as well. You might disagree with me, but I don't know. But yeah, that's all I read. That is not everything that I wanted to read. I had more books on my October TBR, but it is what it is. Things happen. I had fun. I read some really fun books. Vampires and Witches, the best Halloween creatures. So yeah, that was really fun. I would recommend kind of all of those books. I mean, pretty much throughout this entire video from September and October, a lot of these books I think have appeal for, you know, just depending on what you're looking for. I've had a good fall. I've had some good fall reads, but I still have so many books that I'm ready to read. And November is still fall, okay? So I still have some fall books that I'm reading. In fact, the first book that I've read, I'm not going to tell you anything about it, but I read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, but we save that for the November recap. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.